All right, so before we can build the rear suspension, we have to start with this. This is a rear end of my own design. Should be available to you guys in the near future. I cut a spacer. It's just to keep these from pinching in when you tighten it down. You're gonna want this tight to get it correctly fitted onto the chassis. So we just put that on there, put the nut on, and with that spacer I can go ahead and crank this down, but I want to leave some flexibility to get those tabs exactly where I want them. That's too tight. There we go. We can move them. Give it a tap to level those tabs, and that's it. Rear end ready to weld onto the buggy. All right, so first things first is I'm gonna get a register for how level my chassis is on my garage floor. So in comes the rear end, and you can see I've already polished off a spot so I have a nice solid weld. You just put it on there. Now the secret here is getting it exactly level and exactly square. So I'm gonna take quite a bit of time doing this. You want your sprocket and your rotor facing exactly forward and exactly back. Now with that tacked in place, I'm just gonna snug this up just a bit. Still have plenty of movement, but it's gonna stay where I leave it. Looks pretty good, right? Just bolt on Miata axles. Oh, I like it. For the wheels, I've already bolted on my adapters. I already have the hubs in place. The bearings already pressed in, and I've already made these tabs. Now, you can see that the bottom tabs are longer than the top. Well, that's because these aren't in a straight line. These are all assembled and ready to go. So I guess the next step is the trailing arms. All right, the next pieces in the puzzle are these two. Now, on the VF1, I said I put in provisions for trailing arm suspension. These are those provisions. These were set at a specific angle to give a certain gap between here so that you could run trailing arms. This one, I'm actually just going ahead and designing it. So, this fits on there as so. You line it up, give it a twist, you put it in there. Now you have a wide berth to accept a trailing arm. Now this should be good for either the Miata axle setup, the Summers Brother Racing Outlaw rear setup, because you can adjust the plunge, you can adjust the axle width with this piece here. Now you can also adjust it up and down if you are being very specific with your angle. All right, so now it's time to assemble the rear end. On the axle, I forgot to mention this, I just cut off that gear for the anti-lock brake system on the Miata. It's super easy. Take the axle nut off. All right, so I know you've noticed the stack of wood here. This is to hold the trailing arm in place while I weld it. We can get an initial alignment on this, and it'll hold everything in place while we tack it together. Now we get our trailing arm. Slide that out, put this on the block, take our front heim, slide it on there, put this back in here. We'll get our radius arms. I like to use clamps to just get everything in place, get a good visual of it before I tack anything. And what I'm gonna do, personally, is I'm just gonna match this right angle of this tube, drop these down a little bit, but you can do anything you want with these. This is where you set your suspension geometry for what you like. And boom, you can start to visualize this trailing arm suspension. Now we can get our upper radius arm. Now this is where you set what's called camber gain. Camber gain is how much the camber changes through the flex of the suspension, all right? Since your body will roll a little bit, even within an sway bar, the angle of this tire to the ground will change with that because of the body roll. I'm basically just gonna put these, I don't know, maybe 4 inches apart to start with. You could try to match these, but as you see, this angle isn't the same. That's why there is camber gain. All right, so before we do any welding, we can check this out. Look at that. So all this is adjustable. The height of the forward, the lateral attachment, the camber gain attachment points for the radius arms. Now, there is a straight section on here so that you can choose your wheelbase. How cool is that? So you can have a long wheelbase if you want a lot of stability for high speed. You can have a short wheelbase. Now this is only, I don't know, about 8 inches of adjustment, but that's huge when it comes to wheelbase. This will go wherever you cut it off. Now, I like to save my hole saw cuts in metal, and they really do come in handy as spacers. They're all 1/8, 3/16, quarter, some of them. So now I've got that lined up. I like it. I'm gonna haul this with some tack welds. So now it is time for one of my favorite things ever, the initial plunge check. So I'm gonna get it off the jack stands. I'm gonna put one jack stand under this axle so it can spin freely. And I'm gonna put the other jack stand under here. Oh, that's probably gonna have to be tack welded. Now this is suspension tuning. So start small, build your way up for alignment, for plunge, for camber gain, for toe in, toe out, everything. Just start slow, make fine adjustments, and look for the issues. Now this is gonna get you very, very close. Here comes the plunge check. That's all the way down. Now it looks like we have quite a bit of camber gain, but that's okay because I'm not gonna have this much suspension travel. All right, so now, and this is for aesthetics only, I'm going to cut off this extra 1.5 inches I don't need, move these bungs forward, just to give this a cleaner look in the back. Wash, rinse, repeat for the other side. The rear end will be done. Just so there's no confusion about it, the plans come with both the trailing arms setup that you saw in this video. They also come with the double A-arm setup. There are the jigs for the upper and lower A-arms. And you can see that at 3 inches for the bung, it's gonna put you right in the ballpark for where you wanna be, even for these Miata axles. These are variable frame cross carts. This was the whole idea from the start. Now, for the rear uprights or the rear engine mounts, I like to put these in. This piece right here will tell you where they go. Tell you the separation. All I did was mark center point on it, and you can position them there, and you can get your level, match the angles of them. They all triangulate in this corner. Then I run these top tubes forward, and then I run just the whole side pieces to get good symmetry. I'll take the angle of the left, match it to the angle of the right, find the sweet spot where they all match up so that the cross members are symmetrical left and right. As you can see, I fit all this up first, even with the tape on, the notch wrappers on it. So now I'm just gonna peel the wrappers off and do final fit and tack. All right, so onto the front control arms. I'm using my jig. I put a brick on it so that I don't get any movement. This stays completely vertical. I'm shooting for 0 camber just to start off with. So I measured the track width of the rear. It's 29 inches to the hub, and with the plunge available from the Miata axles, that could be 30, it could be 28, but it's in the ballpark. With these Razor 800 control arms, the front is sitting at 30 inches to center. So we're within 1 inch of track width. How I do the front is I just make up tabs. I zip tie some flat bar to go completely across the bottom to help line up the tabs. And I will use the radius of the tube for alignment. So you can see the front here is angled up maybe 45 degrees, and the bottom ones are completely level. Two things is, number one, your caster angle. The caster angle set up from the chassis itself is about 8 degrees. So I am just going to match that caster angle from the forward hub, and I'm also going to set the shock up at 6 degrees as well. Now this upper mount has plenty of room to change your wheelbase. You can see I'm running it forward, but that's just to line up the shocks on this upper tube here. I have 5 inches of play to change the overall wheelbase by 5 inches. Right now it's sitting at, I think it's 89 inches. I was shooting for about 87, so that's definitely in the ballpark just to make shock mounting easy. And with this bar across here, I can do multiple shock angles. With the tires I'm gonna run, the tires sit about 2 inches in front of this front bumper. The shocks are gonna bottom out well before it hits this front bash plate. So I think this is gonna work out really well. That's all I'm gonna go into depth on for this. I'm gonna get it aligned, tacked in, put the wheels on, and we'll start mounting the shocks. There we go. Nice clean front end. Nice bit of travel. It's nice and smooth. Yeah, front end is good. We'll come back and mount these shocks, but now we're gonna work on the back shocks. All right, so let's talk suspension. Now, I made it so that you could choose whichever option you wanted. You could do this so that it runs in line with your arm. Now, if you do that, this may not be strong enough, so put a cross member in, probably right here. It would look cool. It would support this. This runs pretty much parallel with this. It'd be easy to make a tab to put right here and good to go. Or you could use the pocket, which is what I'm gonna use just because I like the look of that. Looking at one of these from the back end and having your shocks on an angle just looks cool to me. And I know this is moving in a different direction than that. They're not A-arms, but that's what this little Heim joint uniball, whatever you want to call it, is for. Anything greater than looks like 20 degrees is going to start to get stiction on the shaft. But this has, I don't know, 5 inches of travel. So this is a Crosskart. If you're going off-road buggy, this would be a good option. If you're going Crosskart or street legal buggy, this would be just fine an option. These are beefier shocks and I've been using. These are for a Polaris Razor, which is heavier than this. All right, so shock mounting is actually going to be pretty simple. All I did was make one of these pieces. I set the offset at 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, so I cut exactly through it. And I'm going to use this bar. This bar is at like a 14-degree angle. I just measured it up, set my hole saw to cut that angle, and now I have a nice level adjustable mount. This horizontal piece here is going to make it super easy to mount. I got my tabs welded up or cut out for my shock. I'm going to set my shock on here. I'm going to put my piece there. I'm going to line it up, and obviously if the sag on this lowers it down like 4 inches, all I have to do is lower this down. So I can set my ride height after. So everything right now is just going to be tacked in. Nice. Very, very nice. All right, so it's that time. Let's take it off the jack stands, see if it'll sit on its own suspension. The shocks aren't even moving. That's stupid. All right, let's try that again. I've got some ATV shocks on there now. They're missing all the bushings. They need rebuilt, so there might be some play in there. Let's see what this does. Oh yeah, that's better. Oh, that's pretty good. Look at the dampening. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. So my goal today was to roll this out of the garage and see it from a wider perspective, not just my garage. The snafu with the shocks is a huge setback. So now I have to try to find and source shocks for this. I've just got 2 bars welded on for the front. Right now this has 9.5 inches of ground clearance, which is kind of ideal. Being so wide, it makes it look a lot lower than it is, but it's the same ground clearance as that one. It's the same overall size as the singles. I know the pictures you guys see in my garage makes this thing look massive, but it's not. It's a 2-seat Crosskart, not a Can-Am or a Razor. I'm really happy with how the rear end turned out. The trailing arms looks like they're going to work out really well. This sitting 3 inches lower changes that camber gain. So all I have to do to adjust that, if I need to, is move the upper radius arm mounts up 1 inch or 2, and that'll change the profile of that camber gain. Overall, this thing's coming along really, really well. I'm really happy with the shape. I'm really happy with how everything's fitting together. It's super strong. I'm split between getting just custom shocks, which are super expensive, and sourcing more ATV shocks. This thing turned out to be a lot lighter than I anticipated. I figured all this extra tubing was going to be a lot more weight, but according to my program, this chassis is only going to weigh maybe 50 pounds more. So I was thinking I was going to need double the shocks, but I don't. I only need like 10% more spring rate. I hope you guys like it. I'll keep working on this, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.